My knowledge comes from a Wiradjuri background, and so the philosophies, I guess, and the takeaways that go into my work practice are from that perspective. So for me, I think that the biggest one, Wiradjuri people talk about a thing called Yinjimara. And so Yinjimara is a life philosophy, really, when you boil down to it. And so when you boil it down to, it is to be gentle, to go slowly, to take care, to honour and respect, to do things right. And so if that's the way you live your life, then that infiltrates everything you do.
Are you feeling lost in your career, or you want to have a greater impact but you don't know where to start? Welcome to Kinda Planned, the podcast where we help you unlock the opportunities that you can't plan for. Through engaging conversations with expert guests, we help you unlock the mindsets, strategies and tools that you need to build the career of your dreams. So subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Alex Cutterford, and let's take a moment to unlock your next opportunity. Well, welcome back to another episode. Today I'm lucky enough to have Tracy Ryan with me. Tracy is a career practitioner, mediator, Wiradjuri language consultant, a PhD candidate and founder of Murrindale Aboriginal Corporation, just to name a few of the things that you do and are up to. So thanks so much for coming on with me today, Tracy.
No, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so really keen to jump in and have a bit of a chat. We connected a few months ago now when you were running a session here in the Hunter, sort of thinking through First Nations perspectives and cultural awareness, and really great session with you, and glad to have stayed in touch, and keen to sort of dive in to hear more about your career and some of the insights that you bring, which I know will be hugely valuable. Would you maybe want to share a bit about your career journey and what's led you to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. Originally, I did not do very well in school, but I was very good at drama. And despite the fact that my TER, because it was quite a while ago, came back in the mystery range, I did actually the same day receive a medal from my school for drama. So lucky for me, I had actually auditioned to Theatre Nepean at Western Sydney. Yeah, the Western Sydney University. And so I got the only first round offer in my cohort, and went on to just absolutely love university. The fact that you could be focused on the thing that you enjoyed was just it for me. So I did sort of operate in that theatre sphere for a little while until I think I was about 21, 22 when my parents said to me, well, you're going to have to go and get a job now. We can't actually afford to keep subsidising this. So you don't make a lot of money when you just sort of do it, producing your own stuff with a couple of friends.
Yeah. And
so I actually wound up at the Commonwealth Bank.
Yeah, wow.
I don't know, you don't know me well, but I think you can probably see that wasn't a great fit. So that didn't last very long. And actually my father said to me, well, you promised me you'd become a teacher if I let you do that theatre degree. Okay. But I didn't go back. I ended up getting a job in like mobile and IT tech support in a new little startup in St Leonard's. It was an Optus offshoot. And I actually met the person who wound up being my husband there.
Yeah.
And so really my career started as a kind of happenstance thing where we decided to get married and we figured one of us needed a career. And I thought, okay, I guess I'll go back and do that teaching thing, which I did. And I really enjoyed it. And halfway through the year, I found out I was pregnant. So that worked out well. And then I actually, I started teaching in a school in Mount Druitt. And I really enjoyed it. They had the Plumpton Babies program there, and I was working with the dance teacher who was running that program, who I still stay in touch with because later on she became a careers advisor and now I see her at all our careers stuff. So it's a small world. But I wasn't there for very long before I got a permanent teaching offer at the next school over. Full-time, 7 to 12 drama, you couldn't ask for better. And all the people who'd been, targeted grads, etc., in the program, the teaching program, they were still floundering around looking for jobs. And here I was being handed something on a silver platter. So I thought, right, okay, I'm in. So I did that for about 10 years, and in that process I actually became a careers advisor. There were some changes in the department around hours to drama and dance and all that sort of stuff. And I wound up being this thing called a nominated transfer, which is when there's not a position for you at the school anymore, but you're a permanent employee, so they'll find you another position. So I took the opportunity to actually work part-time, have more kids, and then when I was ready to come back to work full-time, our careers advisor had retired after 50 years.
50
in that role,
years.
50 years in that role at that school. And I'll never forget what my principal said, but I won't repeat it. It wasn't a negative thing, but it was something that I think is a nice moment between the two of us. And anyway, so I took that role on and I did the Department of Education Retraining with a great crew of people, again, who, are still floating around the place. And I don't think I've looked back. The next year I became involved with the Careers Advisors Association on their executive committee. I've been doing that now for 13 years. So I've gone from being the awards and membership officer, and in that time, so when I started, we had one award. Well, we had the Careers Advisor of the Year award, and we had 2 sort of commemorative awards. But in the time I've been there, I've developed a whole suite of awards. That last year was the first year. We have 10 awards on deck, and we had nominations for every category, which was really exciting. But then I got elected as the secretary, so I've passed those awards off. This year we did a transition last year, so they're moving on to somebody else. But I feel like I'm really proud of that legacy, that's what I leave to the careers advisors, because the idea was to recognise the many, many, many things that careers advisors excel in our schools. And just having the Careers Advisor of the Year didn't reflect that at all. So now we've sort of worked through that. Then in the meantime, I've been all over the place as far as teaching goes. I spent just over a decade in that first appointed school in Mount Druitt, and then I went to inner Western Sydney. I went to the Central Coast. I went to North Sydney. I went to southwestern Sydney. I went to far western New South Wales. I went to central New South Wales. I went to the Central Coast. And then through a series of family issues around injuries and my father's declining health, etc., I wound up needing a job in Dubbo because the kids had kind of settled here and didn't want to come back to the coast. So I went back to the coast on my own and commuted between Dubbo and North Lakes High. And that was a long 3 years. And the hard part was that I really loved North Lakes. So it was hard to sort of break the gap, break the chain. So anyway, when I got the job here at Charles Sturt, so at Charles Sturt, I actually came to Charles Sturt as the employment coordinator of the Careers and Skills Hub, which was great. And they were sort of in a rebuilding, recreating kind of phase, which has actually turned out to be the trend in my career. In all the places I've gone to, I've arrived to a point of rebuilding where something has either come to a natural end or it's kind of all crumbled around. People aren't sure how to fix it. So that's kind of I've been the builder of this thing in pretty much every place that I've been to. Along the way, I did get promoted into head teacher positions with the Department of Ed. So I had lots of opportunity to actually make a lot of change for staff as well as students. So I really loved that ability to develop professional development and to start, providing professional development for staff, which, I'm pleased to say I get pretty good feedback on, so that's nice. And then I've just, a couple of years ago, so I did about a year in the Careers and Skills Hub with CSU. And then I thought, okay, if I'm staying here, what's actually my purpose of being here? Where do I want to sort of go? And I thought, I really am a teacher. I'm an educator, and I love career development, and that is my content, that is my focus, that is what I love to teach, but I am a teacher. So I took the opportunity to move into what we call the Division of Learning and Teaching, and became an educational designer. So educational designers, for people who aren't sure of what that is or what we do, sometimes they're also called instructional designers, things like that. So in universities, the onus on academics is to be experts in their area of expertise, not in education and not in teaching necessarily. So you have a collection of people like me who help the academics to turn their materials, their websites, or to learn to actually deliver effective education, which is really lovely. I kind of think of us as the engine house of the university. And then through a series of other bits and pieces and things that have happened, so I ended up moving into an identified position. So I became the educational designer First Nations, which has been wonderful because I get to work directly with one of the elders that I had been learning language from. And so, Uncle Lloyd Dolan's the academic lead First Nations curriculum here, and we work hand in hand. And then I guess in the true nature of ways at universities, I wound up starting a PhD, which I did this year. So today's one of my PhD days. So what I do is I work 3 days a week now, Monday to Wednesday. And then on Thursday and Friday, I work on my PhD. And then in the background of all of that, we run Murrindale. And so all of these things, I think, my entire life have been driven by my cultural identity. So all my time in schools, I was pretty focused on the Aboriginal kids. And I was pretty focused on improving the understanding that our staff have, our teachers have, of Aboriginal young people and of Aboriginal communities, and, just trying to see the things that we don't usually see clearly, just through the nature of colonisation. And so Murrindale, when I started at the university, I made some friends here at the uni, and another teacher I used to teach with out here came to the university and joined us. She does a similar job. And we had all just kind of reached a point where we just felt like we needed to be doing something. We needed to be using the skills we had for the benefit of our community. And so we decided to create this entity, Murrindale Aboriginal Corporation. Murrindale means those from way back in the beginning, in the creation. And so our vision is that we are always being taught by our ancestors from way back in the beginning, and that they're leading us and guiding us in our actions. So what we do is we underpin everything with language and culture, and we work towards advocacy. We work towards, the professional development of industries and professions around cultural awareness. And I focus on education and employment. We've got other members that focus on disability, others that focus on entrepreneurial skills, others that focus on health and wellbeing. And so we're just sort of creating a suite of programs and activities that people can come and start. So our disability program starts on the 24th. Nice. And we have a bunch of people coming in. We've hired a space actually here at the university. and that will just be it's a social and a movement activity that happens weekly. So we're looking forward to that. We're doing that in partnership with Dubbo Regional Council. So yeah, that's sort of what we're doing there. And then, of course, in the background of that, again, I've been doing things like creative writing. So I've had some work published. Actually, I wrote it last year, but it was published this year in the Yinjimara Journal, which was something that I wrote in Wiradjuri and then translated back to English to look at actually how language works and how our languages are not a reflection of English in any way, shape or form, that they are their own full language, operational and with deep, deep meaning that shares our knowledge and our understanding of the world around us. So that was a really cool experience, to be honest.
Yeah.
Being selected for that was really cool. So there's lots of stuff going on. That's kind of been the journey so far. And then, of course, the PhD is very much connected to what you saw me present about. That kind of that presentation for Youth Express really kind of cemented to me that I needed to underpin what I know is right and what I know is fact with evidence that's outside just my experience, my lived experience, so that when I'm having these conversations, there's more that backs me up, and that therefore I don't have to be the only person having that conversation. People can draw on my work to have that conversation themselves. So the PhD is focused on the impacts of culturally responsive career development and education for First Nations young people. So looking at if we actually take the time to know what culturally responsive education is and what it looks like and how we do it, what do the outcomes then look like for our young people, for our First Nations young people? And then, the flow-on effect to that. How does that then affect our communities? How does that affect our society more broadly? How does that change and shape the way we actually, as non-Indigenous people, see Indigenous people in our nation? So, yeah.
Amazing work and amazing career, and so many twists and turns, and all the different dynamics that come through when you're living a life and building a career, and there's just so many factors that go into influencing a career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And look, the biggest factor really when I has been my kids. I've got 3 daughters who are all young Aboriginal women, who are all neurodiverse, and that sort of thing. And so it's really kind of been a mission to how do I make the world accessible to them? Because the world's not going to change. They have to be able to figure out, to find their way through. So how do I create pathways that benefit them but will also benefit everybody else?
Yeah, absolutely. I was keen to dive into the conversation around what are the First Nations principles that I guess we can all benefit from in our career, and how we go about our.
So I think firstly, when we say, First Nations principles, we have to look at, well, where are we and whose principles are we actually talking about? So for me, we're talking about, so I'm a Wiradjuri Gamilaroi. My grandmother's family are all, my grandmother's born and raised in Narrabri. My grandfather was born and raised in Sydney, but his father, my great-grandfather, was born and raised in Forbes. So it's very common to have Wiradjuri Gamilaroi people because we're marrying groups. So, so my knowledge comes from a Wiradjuri background, and so the philosophies, I guess, and the takeaways that go into my work practice are from that perspective. So for me, I think that the biggest one, Wiradjuri people talk about a thing called Yinjimara. And so Yinjimara is a life philosophy, really, when you boil down to it. And so when you boil it down to, it is to be gentle, to go slowly, to take care, to honour and respect, to do things right. And so if that's the way you live your life, then that infiltrates everything you do. So when I moved from Dubbo to the Central Coast between the schools, there was a bit of trauma that I took with me, and when I got to North Lakes, the principal said to me after a few months, it'd be nice if you just came in and had a talk with me. And I realised I'd been actively avoiding him. and I was like, I'm really sorry, I wasn't doing that on purpose. But what I'd been doing was trying to protect myself. And then I realised that actually what I'd done was in some ways, I guess I'd been enacting Yinjimara internally to just give myself the time to heal. But then in other ways, I realised that I wasn't living that externally because I wasn't giving other people the opportunity to understand that. So anyway, I went and had a bit of a yarn with him. I had a bit of a yarn with the deputy that I worked most closely with. And we talked about this concept, Yinjimara, taking things slowly. So at the school I worked in, we have a very significant welfare program, a well-being program, and so I was the head teacher of well-being. So, we did lots and lots of stuff to help a lot of kids with a lot of barriers to education. So it was really hectic, fast-paced. There's always not just someone that needs your help. There's always a child that needs your help. And so that concept of slowing down was right out the window in a lot of ways. And so we really had to very actively say, okay, Yinjimara, here's what we're doing. We're going to you tell me what it is? Okay, give me a minute to sit with that. Because that's the thing, is that without Yinjimara, we're reacting, we're not responding. And the other thing that I think is really important is that we all get very wrapped up in our intentions of the things we're trying to do, and inevitably most of those intentions are really good. But the impact that they have, which is actually the important part, we often don't think about that, and the impact a lot of the time is not what we intended it to be, or it doesn't have the outcome that we were looking for. And what we kind of forget, I think, when we're in our workspaces is that impact is impacting on a person. So, we're people doing our jobs, and we're doing our jobs with and for other people, not concepts, not things, And so it's really important to remember that actually what we're doing is working relationally, and we're working in relation to all those people around us, regardless of what our role or their role is, because it's all about, and that's very much a Wiradjuri philosophy. It may well be for others as well, but we operate, our language works, everything, the way that we think and see the world is relationally. It's me in relation to all these other things. I don't exist on my own. I exist in relation to. And so I think when we start thinking that way in our workplaces, and when we start thinking that way in our career development and how we actually take on opportunities that come to us, I think those things make a big difference.
Yeah.
And then, hugely, again, obviously, in the actual impact you leave behind.
Yeah. I remember you mentioned, and I forget if this was a part of that word or whether there was another word, but you talked about the I guess the flip side to it of the working quickly was lazy man's work.
That's right.
And that really stood out to me because I think that is definitely a contrasting view to a typical Western perspective of hard work looks like cranking out more and more, working quickly, hustle, hustle, hustle.
Yeah.
But that, of course, is when we start to often miss the impact that was actually required and stuff, because you're just caught up in the churning things out and not actually thinking about what the outcome's going to be. We're just trying to pump through more things, and that
and
really stood out to me.
Yeah, and you rush, and inevitably when you're rushing, you make mistakes. You forget things, you drop things along the way. So yeah, that idea of doing things the right way means that you take your time to get it right the first time, which then means it's the only time that you actually have to do that job. Where when you're rushing and you're being lazy, that word in Wiradjuri means the same thing. So it's and there's so much in our language that's like that, and that is that flip side. But then again, when you look at those 2 points alone, you start to see the difference, like you were saying, between Western and First Nations philosophies, and then you start to see where the conflict lies. There's lots of colonial documents in our archives and things that talk about the lazy blackfellas, just sitting around fishing and doing things like that, because we weren't hacking away at fields and all that sort of thing. But that's a whole different way of land and resource management that was brought to a new environment, which, that's not the right way to be treating our land anyway. And B, we'd already cultivated a whole lot of stuff. We had been taking Yinjimara for tens of thousands of years. And so, yeah, we were at the point where life is good because we know how to do this stuff. And we know when to fish, and we know when to hunt kangaroo and emu, and we know when to, harvest this plant and that plant. And so, no, life's not terribly hard or, overly physically demanding, because we also know it's really hot in summer. So in summer, you eat foods and you do stuff that conserves energy. And then you spend your energy in winter when you've got more of it, So it's that whole, I guess, knowing and understanding the cycles of your world. But again, what does that come back to? That comes back to Yinjimara. That comes back to taking the time to actually observe what's happening over generations and to link things together. Oh, this is flowering. That means that animal's doing this, or this is happening in the river. We go and do that now. Yeah.
And so the thing that's coming to my mind of someone that maybe finds themselves in a they're working in an office role and they're sitting there, and maybe it's the fact that they've stepped in this job and all of a sudden it wasn't quite what they thought it would be, or maybe the culture of the place they've ended up in isn't quite right. And maybe instead of quickly, quitting the next day or something, maybe you just take some time to actually sit back and observe what are the things here that are driving this, and is that something that I can influence? Or is it something that is like, no, it is appropriate to step away, but you do that thoughtfully rather than rushing off to the next job, never actually assessing to realise actually it's you that's the problem and you're the one taking it everywhere you go.
That's exactly right, yeah. And one of the things that I say to people when I'm giving interview advice, it was a little harder in COVID times, but now that we're sort of back to face-to-face, and you can still kind of do it depending on where your online interview might be happening or what the workplace is. But one of the things I say to people is take the opportunity to have a little look around the workplace. So are people endlessly buzzing around, and, how does that feel? Do people look happy and engaged, or do they look tired and struggling to focus? Really have a look at the workplace around you, because I know sometimes it's not always our choice and we just need to take a job because we need to pay the bills. However, in the circumstances where that's not the case and we're making some choices for our own career progression, I think there's something really important about knowing what the environment is that you're going to walk into, and remembering that an interview is actually about two people or two parties. So, yeah, okay, someone's got a job that you want, and they want to interview you, they want to hear what you have to say. But on the flip side of that, you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, because you are entirely, within your rights, I suppose, to know what you're walking into, to know what the expectations of those people are, to know what the culture and environment is that has been created in that workplace that you're going to be expected to participate in. And so I think it's really important that we kind of shift the perspective of what an interview is. So instead of an interviewee walking in, oh my God, they're in there, am I going to say the right thing? Are they going to be telling me the right thing? Are they telling me the stuff I want to hear about, a kind of workplace I want to work in? So I think we need to look at that in a more balanced way as a conversation between two parties who both have something the other one wants. And, because that's why people call you into an interview, because you've got the skills and experience they need. So, I think we need to kind of back ourselves a little bit more. And if we were all kind of looking at that cultural aspect as well as, the detail, the minutiae of the actual job, I think we'd probably shift a lot of the outcomes that we achieve in our workplaces.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned back in around the 10 awards that you introduced for the career advisors. I'm interested to know what some of those are, because I'm interested to unpack, I guess, like some of the different focus areas of career development and ways that it can be done well.
So we've got awards that look at specifically at student engagement. So we've got awards that look at careers advisors that are working with primary school students instead of just high school. So in New South Wales, careers advisors are appointed to high schools, but we know that nationally, Seeker, etc., have been talking about the fact that we need to be influencing younger children. So in our central schools particularly, careers advisors have the opportunity to do that when they're working in that K-12 environment. So we wanted to recognise that. We have a Diverse Learners Award. So, again, from my lived experience of having my children and knowing that they went to schools and largely went to schools that were heavily influenced by me just because of where we were at the time, but knowing that there were plenty of other schools out there that weren't necessarily. And one of the other things I did when I was in schools was a lot of the schools I worked with, I'd be involved in the transition program for students with disability, etc. So there's a specific in New South Wales government schools program around transition from school, and careers advisors aren't always involved in that because it's kind of run by a regional itinerant teacher that comes into schools. But it was nice to be involved in that in a lot of ways, because careers advisors do bring a lot of knowledge that isn't necessarily held by those itinerant, because the itinerant teacher that's coming in is an expert in students with disabilities. So we looked at that. We looked at careers centres themselves. So an excellence in actually the physical environment that you create. Mm-hmm. The resources you have available, how students interact with that. And we looked at delivery of professional development. So there's a professional development award. There's an industry engagement award, which we largely had to create around, we'd sort of moved towards it, but then we partnered quite heavily with state training around the REAP program, the Regional Industry Employment Partnership. And so what we decided to do was to acknowledge the careers advisors who were really engaging in that REAP process, who were getting in touch with their REAP and saying, okay, here's my idea, let's make it happen. So that idea around actually, rather than just attending the excursion or lining the kids up, they were actually really engaged with the process. We've also got an innovation award. So the innovation award is around those people who just, they have those brilliant ideas. And then not only do they have a brilliant idea, but they just make it happen. And we really wanted to recognise that. And so, we we've sort of shifted and changed and grown over the time. We had a transition. It was the Careers and Transition Award. We've needed to clarify that a little bit over the last couple of years, that actually that's a team award. So rather than, it's not just one person. It might be one person who comes and collects the award, but actually it's about the Careers and Transition team, because more and more our schools have teams of people who are working in this space, which is awesome. That's what we want. We want teams of people to be focused on what, for me, is the whole point of school. Like, what's the point of school? Well, it's what you're going to go and do afterwards, isn't it? We don't go to school and then that's the end. Which I guess has always been that point of conflict for me. I don't know how many times I've said it, and people are like, oh, they're maths, they're science, they're art, they're whatever, And, I'm a Kappa teacher, but the point is, yeah, they might be great at that, but then can they do something with it? Do they want to do something with it? What do they want to do? Where are we going? What is the point of all of this? Because the point of all of this is not to just be awesome in that class and get an excellent mark on that test. The point is much bigger.
Yeah, and as someone that's passionate about career development myself, it's also it's not just about what job they go and do. Like, this is a young person that is developing, and we want them to be as fully developed, healthy, happy human as they can be and mature into their adulthood. And it's a real privilege to get to steward a young person through some aspects of that. And absolutely. Yes, a big part of it is then going to be what do they do after that, and it's it. Yeah. All of the people supporting, putting themselves aside and truly being student centered is just so important.
Yeah, and you know what? It's fun. I've always gotten a lot more pleasure out of teaching and engaging with young people when actually the whole goal is the success of that young person, rather than what's my success, what am I getting out of this? Because it's like, what do I get out of it if they don't get anything out of it? That's a big fail for me, isn't it? If I've got kids walking away going, oh, I couldn't talk to her, she didn't understand me, that was totally useless. That's a big fail. I need those kids to be walking away thinking, oh, okay, oh, I see now, I could do this, or I could do that, or this links to that. And, oh, I need to go and figure this out, and then I'm going to go back and see what she says about that. We need to be really engaging and inspiring the conversation, lighting that fire, they always say that, lighting the fire rather than containing it, I guess.
Yeah. Like, the term is often used of, you don't remember what people had said, but you remember how they made you feel. And it couldn't be more true, particularly when you're a young person, like in your memories of your teachers. You either remember, I got along well with them, they made me feel safe, or they empowered me, or they were just the worst.
Yeah.
It's like, whether they're good or bad, you don't remember what they're trying to teach you.
No, that's exactly right. And I've been reflecting on that. It's something that I'm writing about as part of my PhD. Is which teachers stood out and why, and then can I connect that back to a cultural link, either for me or for them, And it's interesting because there's only a handful, I would say, from kindergarten right through that really stick out for the relationship that I had. And really they're the ones I remember, is the relationship that I had, which is very culturally transparent, because that's, I said before, that's how we exist. But then, there's that one teacher, and I'll never forget, I changed schools in year 5. And so I was new to the school. I was making new friends. Oh, my God, I was so bad at maths. Although, surprisingly, now I'm older, I'm starting to understand maths, because I think that's the thing about maths, is that it's a language you need to learn to understand, not something you can by rote figure out. Anyway, that's aside. But everything was kind of going okay. And then I walked into that class and we had to do I just remember it was a big sheet of cardboard, And I remember him ripping mine up in front of the whole class and telling me I was stupid. And I've never forgotten it. And that now I'm talking about it, I can feel that humiliation in the pit of my stomach. And I just turned 47. And I was 10 when that happened. So, you're just like, oh, man. And I think about that sometimes, and I think actually it really drove me as a teacher to never do that to somebody.
Man, yeah. There are some wild stories.
I know, it's wild, isn't it? When you think about it, you're like, what was that guy thinking? Like, okay, you're having a bad day, dude.
That really makes my story that I often share really tame, because I always talk about the teacher that was in year 2 trying to teach me how to spell.
Yeah.
She went through all her tricks and she was out of tricks, and she was like, maybe you're just not going to be a good speller.
Well,
And I sort of said, all right, sweet, I'll stop trying.
To be honest, that's kind of better. Like, if that guy had said to me at 10, maybe maths just isn't your gig, and had just put that thing away somewhere outside, that I would have been able to walk away from that.
You might have a bit less traumatized, but maybe not necessarily motivated.
Exactly, and I'd probably have a story that didn't make me feel sick to the stomach, because I'm sure that story doesn't make you feel as bad as it potentially could, because she's, it's kind of like a mum thing to say almost, isn't it? Well, maybe you're just not going to be that thing, darling.
Oh man. Yeah, so there's definitely some wild stories along the way.
Yeah.
So I guess the key message that I sort of try to share through this podcast is that it's about taking ownership of your career, and we can't necessarily control everything about it, but we can take ownership of it. What would be your thoughts to someone that's looking to navigate their career? Maybe they're early in their career. Maybe they've sort of just found their feet now. They've sort of been working full-time, but maybe they're now starting to rethink, is this the right spot for me? What do I really want to do with my life and my career? What would be your thoughts to them?
I would say that, all things being equal, take the risk. Because there are going to be times in your life where you can't do that, where, you might be the person who in your household pays the bills. That's a reality. So there are going to be times where you do need to take a safe pathway, and you just need to make sure that your ass is covered. That happens, but that's not your whole life. So I would really say to people, take into account your stage of life, remembering that you're not always going to be in this same stage, and you're not always going to have the same opportunities. So here's probably the pivotal example for me. Remember I said before that I was on nomination and I had babies and worked part-time? Back when I started teaching when I was 24, 25. So I'd already done some stuff, and I'd already kind of run my own little business, I'd already been a team leader in a professional environment. I came to teaching with some broader experience. So I kind of felt like I was ready really early in my career to make that jump to head teacher. I wasn't, PS, but I felt like I was. So then I had to make this decision around, okay, they're reducing hours in dance and drama. That affects me and that affects this person. And the deputy came in and explained all the things that it meant to us and what we had to do. So then I had to sit down and say, okay, all things being equal, what is the right thing to do here? The other teacher was coming to the end of her career. She had spent 30 years in the school. She had just found out she was unwell. I was new to teaching. I had one baby. I was being told that the thing that I'd trained for and had been looking forward to doing for the rest of my career was up the creek. And one of us had to make a decision, and I could see the look on her face, and I could see that the career goals I had were very rapidly slipping away. And I also had to say to myself, you're only, I think at the time I was 26, 27. You're only 26, 27, Tracy. This is the beginning. And so then I went home, I had a conversation with my husband, and we had, one child, and I was like, okay, what are we doing with our family? What's our plan here? Because that is an important part of your life. And we acknowledged that, yep, we were going to have more children. Okay, righto. So what's the plan? Okay, let's do this. What if I take the nomination, because they'd already said to me I'd have a job, like I wasn't going anywhere. I take the nomination. That way my colleague doesn't have to worry about that while she's dealing with other stuff. We can do our family stuff knowing that I've still got a solid income and I've got time if I want it. And then we figure out what happens with my career later. And so that was what we did. And in the end, what it turned out to be was that on the very first day that I arrived in that school, the principal pulled me into her office and she said, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm such and such. So you're going to be our drama teacher. Now, she said to me, in the event that we don't always have that as an option, what other things do you think you'd like to do? And I said to her, actually, I really love the idea of careers education. I hadn't known about it until I got into a school, and the previous school I'd been in, And she said to me, okay, right. And so then, a few years later, I go on nomination. A few years later, I've been working part-time. I've had all my babies. My youngest one's nearly a year old. And she rings me and she says, so, remember how we had that conversation and you said that you thought you wouldn't mind careers? Well, guess who's just retired? Do you want the job? And look at where I've gone from there. It shifted my whole career pathway. So I think that sometimes we have to take the calculated risk.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really good advice, and I appreciate all of your perspectives and views that you've shared today, Tracy. How can people find you and get in touch with you if they want to?
How can they find me? Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Tracy V. Ryan. I put the V in there because a lot of Tracy Ryans around the place. You can find me at contact@murrindale.com.au, and so Murrindale is MARRADHALI. Or you can find me at tryan@csu.edu.au.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to Kinda Planned. Subscribe and send this episode to a friend that you think needs to hear it. Or head to my website, www.kindaplan.com.au for free resources. Or follow me on LinkedIn and socials so that we can keep the conversation going. Now go unlock your next opportunity.